Well, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the ESP Professional Development webinar. Thank you for joining us today. We have a lot of wonderful colleagues joining us, and I'm admitting more into the room as we continue. It's my pleasure to welcome you to the Epsilon Sigma Phi Professional Development webinar series. My name is Paul Roback, and I serve as the chair of the Professional Development Committee. Please take a moment to drop your name and institution in the chat box so we know who is with us today. We're happy to see many of our ESP members take advantage of this free webinar. It's being recorded, as you heard, and it'll be posted to the archives on the National Association website with our other webinars, so that they'll be accessible to all of our members in the future. All participants are on mute during the presentation. However, you may use the chat box to ask questions or make statements during the webinar. There'll be a few minutes at the end to the presentation to answer some of your questions. So thank you for joining us today. With that, I would like to introduce Steve Brady from the Ohio chapter of ESP, the Alpha Eta chapter. And today his presentation is on expanding your leadership potential utilizing a cultural intelligence approach. As abstract stated, that research indicates that educators who can effectively understand and work with others who are different greatly increase their chances of connecting and positively impacting with their audiences. The concept of cultural intelligence, one's capability to function effectively in situations characterized by cultural diversity, will be explored. This session is designed to help participants increase their effectiveness in working with others, regardless of their cultural background. The variety of interactive online activities will challenge individuals on a personal and group level. So with that, I'll turn it over to you, Steve.
Okay, you said a free word. I thought this was a paid webinar. Oh well. Oh well, that's the way it
You work for
goes.
Extension, right? You
I
know.
guess, yeah. Well, thank you, Paul, and thanks everyone for coming out or joining the Zoom webinar today. I do want to just pause for just a few minutes. Actually, our office is actually didn't realize was is out today, and we have a vacation day for Extension in Ohio, at least for Veterans Day. So I guess that's maybe not the case for other states, and I know the schools are still in session, at least here in Ohio. But I did want just to pause for just a brief minute, really to honor those who have served in our armed forces and those who are currently serving, and just thinking about all of them and their service that we have. So if we can just take a couple seconds and do that. Okay. All right. Well, I think people are still joining us, but I do again thank you for being a part of this. I think I know some people on the call. I've crossed paths with some people, and from various states and various different kinds of activities. So, well, good to see you again, and glad to meet all of you who are new as well. So, my name is Steve Brady. I work as an extension educator here in Southwest Ohio near Cincinnati as in 4-H. And so I've been here, I'm in my 24th year in extension. Hard to believe that it's gone by that fast. And I think maybe some of you are maybe in a similar boat. I think we have a very wide range of age and experience here. So that makes this topic that much more, I think, exciting to have that experience, both closer to retirement and those maybe who just started their extension work. So I think this topic applies to everyone and no matter what how much experience you've had in extension as well. So if you I'd love to have your camera on if you can. That'd be great. I love that I normally do this session in person, and it's difficult, I think, sometimes to do some of the activities just online in general, but I'll do my best. But sometimes having a camera on just helps with engagement a little bit more so. So the first thing I'd like to do is an activity I do a lot. If you just cross your arms, if you would. So wherever you're at, just cross your arms. And just notice sometimes when you don't even think about crossing your arms. You don't think about what arm goes on top. You just do it. So I want you just to look down and see which arm is on top. So you have right over left or left over right. All right. Now I want you to switch which arm is on top. Some people may be even struggling a little bit with how to do that. So it probably feels a little bit different and even kind of looks maybe a little different for some on some people. Now I'd like for you to cross your hands like this And just again, notice probably one of those thumbs probably just went right on top of the other, didn't think about it. Now I want you to switch the thumb that's on top. May also feel a little bit different. So my hope is today that we go over some different things that may challenge you to think about things a little differently. Because just the way that we cross our arms or we cross our hands, we get into certain patterns and ways that we do things, some of which are very helpful. It takes us away from having to think about things all the time, but sometimes they can be a hindrance to different things that we're doing, whether it's programming, working with different audiences. And sometimes we can get kind of stuck in the same thinking over and over again. And it doesn't serve us or the audiences that we're trying to serve very well. So my hope is some of the exercises and activities and short little video clips that you see will help to challenge some of the ways in which you may do things with the audiences that you work with. And that could be youth, adults, no matter what the age range or different groups that you work with. So that's, again, my hope. So I'm going to share my screen here. I think I do have privilege to do that. So before I do that, okay, now I can share. I didn't want you to see the first. Okay. Hopefully people can see that now. Oh, are we good there? Great. I'm going to
Yeah,
get back
good.
where I can see you. Thank goodness for two screens. Sometimes this is difficult. I'm so spoiled with having two screens here in the office. All right. So this is the title, and I think Paul did a great job reading, of course, the description of kind of what we're talking about today, this idea of cultural intelligence and a different approach for that. Again, I introduced myself with that. So the goals, hopefully, in this session, and we're really here just a short period of time. I'm really going to cover just a very cursory glance, a thumbnail sketch of what cultural intelligence is and what it involves. But I'm hoping to increase your awareness of what the concept is if you don't know it already. And then I hope to help you examine some of your own biases, maybe unconscious, that can limit your connection ability with the audiences that you're working with, and particularly those audiences you may not feel as comfortable with. And then I hope to help increase the strategies that you may have in order to working with people who are different. Maybe there are some groups that you work with where you're don't kind of connect as well, or you have different ways of seeing things, and you're just not able to get across the things that you want to. My hope is that what we could talk about today will help at least a little bit in some of those things. I do want to talk about this stress, because stress is really important. We all deal with stress, no matter if it's personal that we're bringing into the office or bringing into a meeting. But stress is obviously a big impact on not only just us, but our audiences as well. And so I'm going to give you a visual stress test. And so the next slide that you see will have two dolphins jumping out of the air side by side. The greater difference you see in the dolphins, the higher your stress level is. The more identical you see the dolphins, the lower your stress level is. I think I said that correctly. Okay, so just take a look at the next picture. All right. So hopefully you're seeing a dolphin and a cow jumping over the water. So if you don't see a dolphin and a cow and you see them as identical, then that's a whole nother session that we probably should plan in order to figure out what's happening. But this is really just to emphasize that we're all carrying stress, and that stress can be a real factor in how we relate to and how sometimes we don't relate to other people. And when we feel uncomfortable and we feel stressed in an interaction or in a teaching session with a different audience that's not as familiar to us, it can kind of cause this disconnection. So just acknowledging that that may be there when you interact with different audiences and different cultures, and that's okay. That's totally normal. So cultural intelligence, this is the kind of boils down to what it really is the knowledge and skills to increase the ability to relate and work with people across different cultures. That's really what it boils down to. It's not a fixed thing, so it's not once you're going to achieve cultural intelligence and boom, you're there. But it's not fixed. It's a continuum, and it's portable, and you carry these things with you. So no matter where you go, what audiences you work with, you can carry these things with you. Your CQ, and we're calling it CQ, your cultural intelligence increases. Your creativity, innovation of how to address things also increases. So it's that proportional increase. Some of the origins, it was introduced in 2003. Christopher Early and Soon Ag are the ones that introduced the concept of cultural intelligence. What I'm using, the further developments of what cultural intelligence has become later on is by David Livermore, who I'll talk about a little bit later. But he's the one that I studied underneath and had classes with to kind of talk about what cultural intelligence is more modern day. It was developed in academic arenas to really kind of help study abroad people to be more culturally proficient when they go overseas, or faculty when they go overseas. That's kind of where their origins were formed to develop that intercultural performance. But it's been branched in all kinds of different fields, both nonprofit, for-profit, corporations. So it's really in a lot of different places now, and a lot of research has been done around its effectiveness. This is, again, cursory glance. We're going to go over these, so I don't want to spend too much time on this, but these are the kind of 4 areas we're going to dive into today that have to do with cultural intelligence. It's CQ drive, CQ knowledge, CQ strategy, and CQ action. And so the hope is that we'll actually go take each one of these individually. We'll have an activity of some sort around it, and then we'll have some questions to be able to process that. So that's kind of how I organize the next 45 minutes or so with that. And when I say culture, I think it's important first to stop and say, what is culture? Because sometimes when people think of culture, they think of far off places or a foreign land, or, speaking a different language, or, have a whole different way of doing things. That's true, and that is a different culture. But culture can be really any particular group of people that have kind of an operating norm or culture of beliefs at a particular time. So I think of culture as being your work culture. So, however your office is structured, you have a culture of how you operate in your office. You have a culture in your extension organization. You have a culture within your family. You have a culture within your group of friends that you hang out with, maybe out of the office. So culture is really a general term for that. And so cultural intelligence is really to be able to operate in and among those different cultures with effectiveness. So that's kind of what I mean in this broad sense of culture. So let's start right off the bat. And again, this is not going to dive too deep into this. There's all kinds of information that I'll put at the end that has resources if you can dive further. There is actually trainings that you can sign up for to learn more about cultural intelligence, to become a trainer, all those different things. Just like the interculture assessment, you can, the IDI, that's another whole nother area of intercultural competence as well, which I also am a qualified administrator for. This is just a different framework in order how to look at culture. All right, so let's start off with CQ drive. It's really the motivation to adapt cross-culturally to unfamiliar surroundings. My guess is because you signed up for this session, that your CQ drive is probably going to be a little higher than maybe some of your colleagues, because you maybe already are working in this arena. You're already kind of working with different groups of people. You're pretty savvy with knowing what to do, what not to do in certain cultural settings. So your drive may be a little bit higher. And again, think of it as a continuum. The hope is to push you a little even further down the CQ drive spectrum. All right. All right, so raise your hand. And some of you may have seen these illusions. I love these kind of things. Raise your hand when you find the mistake. Raise your hand when you find the mistake. All right, Lisa's found it. Great. Good job, Lisa. Toby, you haven't found it? He's looking hard, though. Mary, you found it. Good. And I can't see everybody on my screen. Julie's found it. Okay, good. All right, we won't spend too much time. All right, Lisa, can you unmute and just tell us where the mistake is?
It's right there in the middle row. It's spelled Mistake.
No.
No?
Is that how you spell mistake? I hope that's how you spell mistake. All right, so that's not it, but that good observation.
Oops.
Julie, where is it?
The word the is listed twice.
Yes, the word the is twice. So can you find the mistake? Yeah, so it has nothing to do with the numbers. Maybe you'll be looking at the numbers. Yeah, and I apologize. I can't see everybody's. I know we have more people than what's on my screen. So sorry, I'm calling. People who are on video, I can see most of you. Okay, good. Let's keep going. What do you see here? And you feel free to unmute. I don't want it to be like class or anything. So unmute if you could see what's here in this illusion. What do you see?
Good and evil.
Good and evil. Yes. Good in black, evil in white. Yep. Good. What about here? What do you see here?
Frog.
Frog. Okay. Yep. Shell, see a frog. You may see anything different than a frog or
And
anything
a
more than a frog.
horse. A
A
horse.
horse. Yeah. Is it Marcia?
Yes, it's Marcia.
Marcia. Marcia. Yeah. Marcia. Yes. Yes. There is a horse there. Anybody see the horse? And what if I
The
did this?
hair.
Does this help?
Yeah.
Yeah. That helps. Now, Gwen did something that I didn't ask her to do, but she did it in order to see something different. What did you do, Gwen, or what did you notice that you did to see something different? And Mark's doing it right now. What's Mark doing? Mark, what are you doing to see something different? Oh, okay, I think what you said is, yeah, you turned your head.
I'm looking at it from a different perspective.
Yeah, you look at a different perspective. So I didn't ask Mark to look at a different perspective or Gwen or others to turn your head. But in order to see something different, sometimes you have to change maybe the way that you're looking at it to see things differently. And sometimes we don't always do that. We want to see things the way in which that we've always seen them. And sometimes it reveals something to us when we look at things a little differently. So this would indicate some of your drive would be a little bit maybe higher if you're changing the way you look at things to see things a little differently, then your CQ drive is kind of inching further down so where you can see more things in a situation that's involved. All right, so last one I have here is an illusion. Most people probably see the lake scene with people staring out at the lake and the tree branch, all that. Does anybody see anything different than that?
Baby.
Baby.
A baby. Yep, Mary, yes, a baby. So it's a baby, kind of baby in the womb. You see the feet and the head. Yep, it's a baby in the womb. Yep. I love to use these illusions because I think they, particularly with teens that I work with, because it helps them to get across the point that they really have to look at things a little differently. Okay, here's another one. It's an awareness test. So take a look at this video. How many passes the team in white make? All right, how many? 13. Anybody get that correct? All right, so raise your hand if you saw the moonwalking bear going through this thing. All right, so people have probably seen this, that's my guess, right? All right, so if you didn't see the moonwalking bear, watch now. There it is, right through the middle of the screen. All right, good. So many of you have seen this. This is a pretty old clip, but again, this was done it was an advertisement in Britain to look out for cyclists. Cyclists were being hit on a alarmingly high rate, so they put out this advertisement to help people to see things, to look for cyclists. We have something similar in this country about look out for motorcycles. Same kind of campaign. Motorcycles get hit because we weren't looking for them. So it's easy to miss kind of what we're not looking for, or sometimes who we're not looking for. Sometimes we have people within our midst, within our communities, within our programs, potential programs, that we're not necessarily seeing, and we're not inviting, or not actually bringing them to our programs. And so some of the cause for CQ Drive is to ask some of those questions: why is that maybe the case? And then here's a couple of questions, and if people want to respond to this, we can. I don't know that we're gonna have time to break into small groups like I had wanted to, since I had to do all 4 sections. But if we do at the end, we can kind of come back to some of these questions. But if somebody wants to comment to number 1, or the first question I have, when is the time that you've missed the obvious when you've worked with an audience? Something that's happened, and you realize much later it occurred when it was there the whole time. But you maybe as the leader, as the educator, agent, you just missed it. Anybody have an example about that or want to share? Yeah, Julie.
I was asked to teach with a Native American group, and I didn't think that they would have a native language that I needed to be aware of. So, I had taught them previously, a lot of them in another class I was teaching, and they're very fluent in English. But at this one class I was teaching, they actually broke off and had a Shoshone language person start translating what I was saying.
Wow. Yeah. So that was a pretty stark realization for you. Yeah, for that. Okay, great. Well, thank you. Thank you for sharing that. Anyone else? All right. Well, so then the part of the question is in terms of the CQ, when you take the assessment, there are some questions related to drive on there. And some of these things have to relate to how interested are you in seeing different things from different perspective? Why or why not? What are some of your background or some of your experiences you've had that maybe limit some of those things with seeing that? Who influenced you? Who are the people that you look to? And were they also really good at seeing things that other people maybe didn't? And I think as educators, this really speaks a lot of high that it's really important for us as educators and agents and working in extension, since we work with the public, to have a pretty high CQ drive because we are working for everyone in our counties and our states. And so it's important to have kind of a high CQ drive to really looking for some of those things, those audiences, those different cultures, different groups of people that maybe aren't targeted as much to bring into our programs, particularly since we have so many great things to offer in extension, no matter what program area that you work in. All right, and again, we're going to go through these quick. I apologize for this. It's only an hour. CQ knowledge is the next section, and it's really kind of that level of understanding of difference and similarity. That's really what it boils down to. So that level of understanding. And the activity I have for this one has to do with maps. And so I absolutely love maps as a kid. I love flags. I love just the globe, like all these things. So just maps were just fascinating to me. And if many of you remember that, if you were in grade school, you may remember these days, may still have them, I don't know. You pull down the map and you have that, that you can almost hear it pulling down and sometimes getting stuck and not going back up. But this would be a typical maybe map that you might pull down in a classroom for that. But as you look at this map, it's wrong. There's something wrong about this map. Does anybody want to unmute and give an indication of what's wrong about this map? What's not correct about this map in particular?
The projection.
Yeah, the projection.
It expands the land masses at the areas at the poles and leads to it looking much larger than what you see at the equator.
Exactly. So there's some distortion. And Michael, you're exactly right. So in terms of how you lay a spherical object like the Earth and you flatten it into more of a 2D image, you're going to get some distortion. And that is exactly what happens in a lot of our maps, particularly of the world. And what happens is the poles at the two ends gets really disproportionate. So if you look at Greenland, Greenland, the size of Greenland and the size of South America, they look pretty similar, at least not too much smaller, Greenland does. But in actuality, South America is 9 times larger than Greenland. So if you saw this map and you grew up seeing this map every day, every year, and this became your frame of reference for what the world looks like, you would have an inaccurate picture of what the world is. So your CQ knowledge would be just based on just one atmosphere, one map. When in actuality, you may be having bad information about what you're getting from that. So if you take this and just what Michael said, you put that on a different projection, this is kind of what it turns out to be. Now, it cut off a lot of Greenland, but you can kind of see there's a lot of difference in size here and how the proportions are laid out. So if you put this map up in a classroom, a lot of the kids that I work with will say that just looks weird, or Africa is too big, or the US is too small. But in actuality, those are the landmass sizes for what those countries are. Now, if you really wanted to kind of help and bring about some ways of seeing things differently, this next map is what you might put up in front of a group and see what kind of reactions you get. So you maybe throw this up, and maybe some of you may have worked with this kind of image before too, but it's an inverted map of the world, still the same proportions and everything's correct, but it's just a perspective and way in which you look at things. The world doesn't really change. It's just the way in which you see it. Particularly if you're looking at it from outer space, there's no north, south, east, or west. The center is not the center when you look at it from perspective. So it just helps to kind of break up some of that kind of routine ways of thinking about ways of being of one certain way, one certain thing of doing. All right, how many have seen this video? Now, this is a video that's not particularly, I think several maybe. I don't want to show it if a lot of people have seen it. So, okay, so not people. All right. So this has to do with, again, we're talking about CQ knowledge as well. So.
Steve, no audio.
Oh, shoot. No audio. Paul, we have no audio. Is there
When you share, just make sure you're hitting the audio button.
Gotcha. Let me do that. That is a very important part of this process. Share sound. Okay. Thank you for sharing that or getting me to do you see the screen now? Are you good with that? No, you don't see yet. Okay. You have it now?
Yes.
Okay, great. All right, let's try this again. Audio?
No audio.
Still no audio.
Still no audio.
Okay.
Is
All
that
right.
you have to check when you share screen.
I did. Okay, so share sound, optimize for video sharing. Okay, let's try this. Try this again. All right, let me know if you can get all. Am I hear it?
Still no.
Actually,
I hear
Yeah.
it.
You hear it
yes.
now?
Hi there.
Okay, good.
Hi.
Nice day, huh?
Yeah, finally, right?
Where are you from? Your English is perfect.
San Diego. We speak English there.
Oh, no. Where are you from?
Well, I was born in Orange County, but I never actually lived there.
I mean before that.
Before I was born.
Yeah, like, where are your people from?
Well, my great-grandma was from Seoul.
Korean. I knew it. I was like, she's either Japanese or Korean, but I was leaning more towards Korean.
Amazing.
Hamshasina. There's a really good teriyaki barbecue place near my apartment. So I actually really like kimchi.
Cool. What about you? Where are you from?
San Francisco.
But where are you from?
Oh, I'm just American.
Really? You're Native American?
No, just regular American. Oh, well, I guess my grandparents are from England.
Oh, well. Hello, Governor! What's all this then? Top of the morning to you. Let's get a small tea. Double, toil and trouble. Mind the gap! Beware, Jack the Ripper! Bloody hell! Pip pip! Cheerio! I think your people's fish and chips are amazing.
You're weird.
Really? I'm weird? Must be a Korean thing.
Where? Okay, there you are. All right, so you can hear. So obviously we're talking about CQ knowledge, and I'm going to just share again. Sorry about this. All right, lost you. I lost all my people. So reactions to this while I get my screen back to where I get one and I lose the other. Reaction to this, particularly as it relates to CQ knowledge. So we're talking about CQ knowledge in this. What did you notice in the video? Of course, this is an extreme case, but what did you notice and reflect on that? Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead, Kitty.
The first individual just made a lot of assumptions based on initial impressions and didn't and then didn't like put those assumptions back on himself or themselves. So just like place that externally, but didn't evaluate how the same context would apply to their own experience. And I thought it was really great how like the second individual just really did the exact same thing back and then really called out just how inappropriate that was.
Yeah. Good. Thank you. Others?
But if I may, just quickly,
Sure.
but then it was called out, the person didn't even identify that it was a reality that could in fact go for each of them. And I do this all the time in classrooms where students look like they're from other countries, but they're all actually born in the United States.
Yeah. Good. Others?
Steve, I'll just
Sure.
piggyback off of what Mark shared, that I think the assumption that the visible differences somehow translate to cultural differences, and that can be a very problematic thing. Sometimes someone looks just like us, but there's some significant cultural differences, whether it's ethnicity, but it also could be related to work or geography or things that aren't visible.
Exactly. Good. Yeah, and it's part of the, I think maybe many of us have maybe made this mistake, just like I think it was Mark was sharing about, but it happens, it does happen, and I think it's something just to take note, as you think about CQ knowledge, and in terms of what we are, what information we're gathering, how accurate is it about the audience that we're serving? So it's a question I think we need to go in as, particularly as educators, into who we're serving, and trying to be as accurate as we can with those reflections and those questions. So it really just kind of, from an internal question for you, is what stereotypes or kind of assumptions that you've held on to that may or may not be true, and being willing to be able to examine those, I think, for people. And just like Julie talked about with the Native American group, I think being willing to see that and to be able to then say, admit, okay, this is something that I didn't see before, and you move forward with that. It's not something you have to stop being a part of that group. Leslie, I think you're raising your hand, or maybe you had. Yeah.
Yeah. The thoughts just come to mind that I don't know if this is true across the states, but in Idaho, our annual reporting includes gender, race, ethnicity, etc. So it's that, to me, is almost going the opposite of, I mean, we are required essentially to give our best guess unless they identify a certain way as to whether they're male, female, Asian, etc., etc. So I see a conflict there, contradiction.
Yeah. And I think that's, and sure, we'll get into that in a couple of seconds, but it's a very good point, and we have to kind of make some of those assumptions to start with. And we'll talk about that in just a minute. That's a great point.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Any others want to comment on that particular piece about the CQ knowledge? All right. Michael's talked about federal reporting. Yeah, I think all of us have those reporting requirements for those that reg data. All right, so we're going to move into CQ strategy, and this is the third part. So we've had CQ drive, which again is that motivation to adapt. What's your motivation to wanting to see things a little differently? And then the CQ knowledge is what kind of information are you getting, either from other people or from your research yourself, or your Googling or whatever you're doing, with similarities and differences with the people that you're working with or the culture in which you're in. And next is kind of this idea about CQ strategy, and it's kind of how are you taking the knowledge that you're gaining and you're planning for some of those interactions. So how are you taking that, and how are you going to apply that in the group? So what I have for this exercise is it's a parable, and again, I lose your faces when these things go up. So I will share my screen, but I may lose you again. Okay, entire screen. All right. So I'm going to read this parable to you. Can you see that? And you can read along as well, but just take a look at the picture. A typhoon stranded a monkey on an island. In a protected place on the shore, while waiting for the raging waters to recede, he spotted a fish swimming against the current. It seemed to the monkey that the fish was struggling and needed assistance. Being of kind heart, the monkey resolved to help the fish. At considerable risk to himself, the monkey moved far out on the precarious limb of a tree, reached down and snatched the fish from the waters. Scurrying back to the safety of his shelter, he carefully laid the fish on dry ground. For a few moments, the fish showed excitement, but soon settled into a peaceful rest. All right. So what did you hear in the story? What actually happened? What was the thing that resulted in
The
the
monkey
action?
killed the fish,
Yeah, the
and
monkey killed the fish, right? Pretty plain and simple. Monkey killed the fish. So if you take it kind of in this cultural intelligence kind of landscape or kind of the things that we're looking at, take me through that. So what was the drive of the monkey in terms of how to work in this situation? Pretty driven, right? He
Yeah.
wanted to help, saw an opportunity, saw something that he recognized as maybe struggling, and went to do that. Where is the fault in where was the kind of the place where it kind of start to break down a little bit when if you kind of go into the mind of the monkey, what was happening in there?
I mean, like the person put in the chat, it assumes that everyone has the same desires or wants or needs. I do want to just, we have to be like really careful here because obviously fish and monkey are two different species,
Mm-hmm.
whereas all humans are the same species, and
Good
therefore
point.
we all fundamentally actually do have the same needs. And so it is important to recognize that we all have the same needs for shelter, food, and love and care. And I think that above all is actually more important to acknowledge and uplift than it is to recognize where the differences in our desires and perspectives might be. So while we might have different desires and cultural norms, we ultimately have the same fundamental needs, and those must be met prior to any other endeavors.
Yeah, it's a good point, Kitty. I think that's you speak a lot of the to addressing, of course, being a metaphor, but you're right in terms of what the human and representing human needs. That's important to keep in mind that we do have to address those first. And sometimes it's the method and how we do that. With culture, with regards to culture, that can be a little bit different. But yeah, very good point. What else do you see in this metaphor that kind of ties into what we're talking about with cultural intelligence, with kind of the CQ drive, the knowledge piece, and then the strategies of how in which you go about addressing difference?
Maybe when you're working in a place, regardless of how well you think you know it or know it, ask people what they want rather than assuming it. The monkey made it's like, oh, this fish needs help swimming the other way, and
Right.
and ended up killing the fish in the process.
Yeah.
And sometimes we think we know all the answers for a community we go into, and they want something different that we need to ask what somebody wants before we offer solutions. It's the old there was an old saying, ready, shoot, aim, where we get things out of order, and if we don't consider the parties we are working with and talk with them and find out what their needs are. And getting up higher on Maslow's, there's the basics we know about, but
Right.
there are things above that sometimes what we may, it's like I do planning, and I've stopped using moving community forward because that's actually a value judgment. Helping communities determine and reach out to their desired future is what I try to use instead, because not everybody wants to move forward. Some places would love to just maintain what they have, and that actually takes planning. But if I said forward, I'm presupposing that I know the answers. And so it's thinking about and working with the people who are out there and that you are serving, and trying to work with them and not for them or to them.
Yeah, great reflections, Michael. Thank you. And I think that's, asking them what they want is what I heard what you're saying is very important in that strategy when you're working with other people, as opposed to just the assumptions of what you think that they need for that. Other reflections on this in particular, either what Michael had said or Kitty in general, in particular as it relates to us, our jobs as educators within Extension and working with the public. I think some of the times we, just like what both Michael and Kitty were saying, just in terms of addressing basic needs, a lot of us find ourselves maybe in that space where we're doing that. We're addressing some of those needs are physical, some of those needs are social, some of those maybe even spiritual in some cases. But going into it with this idea, and I think Leslie talked about this, but you have these assumptions already. We have these kind of stereotypes that are in our mind. What do we kind of do with those? We can't just exit out of those and just get rid of them really quick. But what cultural intelligence would kind of say is that there's these smart stereotypes, and there's these they're based on kind of comparative differences with groups of people based on the research, based on what you've been able to find out. So it's almost like you're leading with the stereotypes in your mind, as opposed to letting them kind of drive you to what your decision making is. So you're seeing those, and they're consciously held and recognized out front. And so you're seeing those. This is the stereotype that I have, and then asking yourself, is it correct or is it not? So they become descriptive and not necessarily value based. They're used as a best first guess in a lot of ways. And that's sometimes what we have to go on if we're in a new audience or an audience that we really are unfamiliar with, that we're working with. It's really that best first guess prior to having that information. It does shape and change, based on our further observations. And I think that's part of the strategy, is looking at, okay, it doesn't have to be fixed. I don't have to always go at it this way. I can change my approach with different audiences based on the information that I'm getting, either from another person within that culture, or in the information that I'm gathering from other sources. But it definitely shapes and changes, so it's not a firm piece. Anybody have any other reflections on this particular, the strategies of addressing different groups based on knowledge and your actions?
Steve, this is Toby. Toby, I would add that my experience also has been that cultural intelligence strategy is about how one prepares and plans for those interactions. So think about an interaction where you're going into an environment where it's going to be, culturally very diverse, let's say, on however you want to describe, the diversity of that.
Mm-hmm.
Is how are you preparing, how you are going to both mentally and physically respond in that environment? Because I've had some situations where I've been in an environment where I felt uncomfortable because of the cultural differences, and I'm not well prepared for that, and therefore my planning or the way I interact kind of goes out the window because I wasn't prepared strategically to think about, if this comes up, here's how I'm going to react. Here's how I'm going to respond. I'm going to pay attention to my body language. I'm going to pay attention to my emotional response that's going on in my body, and monitoring how my brain is thinking about these things. So just preparing, I think, is a big part of cultural intelligence strategy.
It is, and you're intentional in doing that, right? So you're intentional in gathering information, intentional in who you talk with, maybe, or what sources you're going to. Yeah, but I agree. It's part of that intentional preparing for entering that interaction. And we're not going to be perfect in every situation. No matter how much we prepare, there are going to be things that may happen that we may be unprepared for, but to be as prepared as we can for those. Exactly. So, you can get to the point where you have the drive to want to do it. You can have the knowledge or gather information, that gathering phase of what you're hoping to gain, and then you have your strategies. But if you don't put it into action, which is the fourth kind of section that we're talking about here, then it really doesn't do any good. So you have to you have a plan, but then how are you going to actually kind of enact the plan with that? So this CQ action really combines all of these previous ones into the part where you're actually using all of that, and then you're actually doing it. So how are you going to adapt to this difference using the drive strategy in the knowledge with that. So what I would like to do, and I'm hoping that everybody has a capability to talk. I think people come on, sometimes maybe if you go into a smaller group, maybe some people maybe the left or something like that. So I'm hoping that the two people that I put you in a room with are able to interact with each other, because this will be important for this activity. So this is called direct versus indirect. And so what you're going to do is there's a scenario, and you're going to choose a person A and a person B. So person A is going to be the person that is going to be inviting you to a dinner party tonight. All right. So you believe that they're going to really enjoy themselves, and they're going to meet lots of great people at this party, and they definitely should be there. So you're really going to put on your best effort to make sure this person gets to the party. All right. Now, person B is going to have another commitment, and they're really not going to be really cool about going to the party. They want to, they kind of get out of it, and they don't really want to attend. So you're going to find some ways to not attend the party or to decline the offer. All right, so you're going to respond accordingly. Okay, so that's our first scenario. So I'm going to give you just a couple of minutes to do that. So I think Um, I don't know how many rooms we need to get into. And if Paul, if you can help me out here, can we break them to everybody into groups of maybe two? Maybe if you're in a group of 3 or 4, then just decide which 2 are going to be A and which 2 are going to be B and just do as a group. Okay. But again, the person A or group A, you're going to be inviting them to a party, trying to get them there at all costs. They're really going to enjoy themselves, all that. B, you're going to be the other person kind of wanting to decline. You don't really want to go. Have other things to do, that so on and so forth. Paul, can you get us into rooms real quick? And it's only going to be a couple minutes because then we're going to have one more scenario and then we're going to be wrapping up pretty soon. All right. Well, welcome back. I don't know how that went. It's hard because normally I do that in a room and you can see some of the reactions and how people do with this. Virtually, this may not be. This part of my CQ knowledge is learning what works and what maybe doesn't in a virtual environment. Just a second. Well, I should have most everybody joining us back again. Okay. All right. Welcome back. I was just saying, I didn't know how this was going to be in a virtual environment. I usually do this when we're in person. It's a really good activity, but sometimes virtually it may not be as striking. I'm sorry for the people who were just in a room by yourself. It was not intentional. This next round, though, you may be in a group of 3 or maybe even 4 people. So that way, hopefully it'll eliminate the one person being stuck by themselves method. All right, so we'll debrief in just a second, but the next scenario is it's going to be the similar thing. You're going to be inviting your whoever's A, maybe you switch it this time. So if you're in the same person, well, you're probably not going to be in the same group, but we choose an A and a B, and you're again inviting that person to a party. Whoever's A, you're inviting that person to a party. You really think they need to be there. They're going to meet some great people. They're going to really enjoy themselves. So really try to get them there. And B, you're doing the same thing, except this time, while you're talking and while you're inviting that person, I want you to stare up to the top corner of the circle or of the square. So you're staring up here as you're inviting that person. All right. And then the person B or the group B, you're going to be trying to stare into the eyes of the person directly. So you're going to try to get that person's attention as much as you can. Okay. So A, your gaze is totally different, maybe off to the side, or staring at maybe the person's neck or ear or something, but try not to make eye contact. Okay. All right. Paul, break them back out and we'll try it again. All right. Welcome back.
I'm sorry, I clicked on the wrong thing before we got started.
That's okay. It's okay. It's again it's a little bit different when you're adding into the virtual world as opposed to in person. All right, we should be getting most people back in a few seconds. Great. All right, welcome back. Again, virtual activity, maybe a little different than it be in person. So I am just curious, how anybody get anything from that activity, or what did you kind of observe either about yourself or about the activity itself or how you were doing things when you added things a little bit different in there, the comparison to? Anybody want to reflect on that just for a second?
It's really hard to talk to somebody without looking at them. Like I was trying to stare off to the side, and it's really hard to like encourage them and when you're not looking at them.
Believe me, in person it would have been even harder. It would have been even crazier. So yeah, you should try that activity. It's really kind of a cool activity to do with a group.
And the two I took the A role this time, and the basically what didn't make the connection because they felt it was distracting and it was uncomfortable, and really it's like I think that's oh no, it's somebody else, but that's the person I was the first time, but basically it makes you like, is this person really invested? They're just kind of talking, but they're not giving me their attention. Right. It's like they're just going through the motions.
Right. And we've all had audience members like that before. Maybe even we've been some of those people to not pay attention. And, so we know kind of how that feels with that. But if we go back to the cultural intelligence piece and the action part, sometimes as educators, we have to be kind of the ones that role model all of these things that we're trying to get across to the people that were there. And so this really begs that question. We have to be willing to step into this space of acting upon the strategies and knowledge that we've gathered from that. So we have to be willing to step into that uncomfortability sometimes and work through that ourselves. So the last set of questions I have for you on the CQ action piece is that, how comfortable are you in changing your behavior? Because when you alter the things that you're going to do with a different audience or different group, you have to be willing to maybe look at how are you behaving in that group and how can you maybe act a little differently in order to be more effective within that culture, within that group, particularly if you're in a very new and unfamiliar environment. And what makes it difficult for you to change your behaviors? The norms in which you've grown up in, which you've kind of inherited. Maybe you've been in the role for a long time. Change is not easy for anybody. But how can you make those more normal, those changes in behavior, than just sticking with the same things you've done over and over again, particularly if you're coming from a particular background. All right, so this is kind of in a nutshell, kind of what we're hoping for this spectrum kind of to be. So if you think about CQ 1.0, it's really a reaction to external stimuli. So you're just reacting to things. You're not thinking about it. You're just reacting to something that's different, and you just leave it at that. That's a kind of the low level if you think about cultural intelligence. 2.0 is that you recognize that there are norms there in a group and or in a different culture, and you want to learn more about it. That's kind of the 2.0 level. If you think about 3.0, you accommodate to other cultural norms in your thinking. So you're being more open to learning about it, and you're accommodating more to maybe leaning toward doing things a little differently and being the people that you're working with. A 4.0 is that you really adjust to the cultural norms in your behavior. So you're really acting in a way that's reflective of the group that you're working with and that you're being more effective with that. So you're adjusting kind of the things that you're doing. But you're doing that consciously. And just like Toby said, you're going into a setting and you're preparing for something that you're doing. Now, the 5.0, kind of the level I think that we're kind of hoping to go toward is this idea that you automatically kind of do things, that you are in a group, that you're not just making assumptions, or if you do, you're aware of those assumptions, but you're automatically kind of adjusting that thinking and the behavior when you get those appropriate cues from your audiences. So when you're finding that you're speaking in a different way that maybe it's not connecting, you're changing that, but you're doing that kind of automatically within that group. So that kind of gives you this idea from kind of low IQ or low CQ to high IQ CQ. These are some sources, and I think we're recording this, so you can always go back and look at these from David Livermore, and what he works in this space all the time. He works worldwide, works with all kinds of different audiences. Is a great trainer. He's there in Michigan, so not very far away, but he has a lot of great resources about this idea of cultural intelligence, and in all kinds of spaces: education, nonprofits, for-profits, corporations, all kinds of different spaces. So. My last kind of say, and Wayne Dyer is somebody that I had gotten a lot of information, kind of wisdom from, who passed away earlier in the 2000s. But if you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change. And so, if I could leave you with anything with cultural intelligence, it's a format, it's a framework that helps you kind of look at change a little differently and look at it more systematic, and hopefully be more effective as an educator with that. And you think you're just as one person, but my last slide obviously shows that we are maybe more powerful than we think, so that we have a little bit more power as educators, I think, to make difference and make change. So think of yourself as being a change maker with this. And one last little activity that I'll leave you with, if you can hold up a finger like this, all right? And I want you to do exactly as I say, okay? Do exactly as I say. Everybody put this on your cheek. 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 All right. So it's okay. So we had some people who are not on the camera. I find though that this in person, almost everybody does this. Video, they do this. I think they're listening more than you're watching. But that really emphasizes that most people watch what you're doing, and the power of communication is the nonverbal. So how we role model this place we're talking about today, or all the kinds of things that we're talking about, is a lot more powerful than the things that we actually say. So I'll leave you with that, is that the power is in what you do, kind of what you role model, not necessarily in the words that come out of your mouth. Those don't come first. It's the body language and the tone of voice, and how you role model speaks louder than words. So with that, Paul, I think we're at 2:01. I don't know if we have any time for questions or not, but that concludes my talking about the cultural intelligence for the day.
Thanks, Steve. We appreciate you sharing that knowledge with us and that content with us. Before we jump into questions, I know some people are going to need to jump off right away. Just wanted to mention that our next webinar is December 9th, and the topic is Community Health Coalitions, Extension as an Integrated System for Health and Wellness. And that's presented by Jenna Daniels and our colleagues from the Georgia Alpha Beta chapter of ESP. So with that, I'm going to stop recording, but we do, if Steve can stick around for a little bit and answer
Sure.
any
If anybody has any questions,
we can do that.
Sure.